Hello BookTube. This is part 9 of my 2022 library tour. Um, I'm going to be continuing on with the modern and contemporary fiction section, so let's get going. First is Life Drawing by Michael Grumly. I picked this novel up on, I think it was Sean the Book Maniac's recommendation. And don't really quite recall what it's about. I built on it in either 2018 or 2019 and haven't had another go at it since. So. Next is a collection of short stories that I had in the early aughts and really enjoyed and got rid of and have just recently picked back up, and that's We So Seldom Look on Love by Barbara Gowdy. Barbara Gowdy is a Canadian author, and her work is rather gothic, I would say, or at least the short stories in this collection are gothic. I haven't gotten around to rereading them yet, but hopefully I will in the not too distant future. Next up is another book I think I picked up on Sean the Book Maniac's recommendation, and that is Cody by Keith Hale. This one I remember a bit, excuse me, a bit more about. It's about a gay high school student who comes of age in the South. Don't think I quite like that one all that much, but again, I'll probably have another go at it at some point. And it came from the Chicago Public Library. Cool. Next up is a book I've had for ages. Since I was, I think, a high school senior is when I picked this up. It's Mysterious Skin by Scott Heim. I talked a bit about this in 2020, I think, when I reread it for the first time in ages. It's Scott Heim's debut novel. It's about how two young men cope with their sexual molestation by their Little League baseball coach. One becomes a hustler, and the other one believes he was abducted by aliens. So yeah, I've had it since I was a senior in high school, and I actually discovered this novel because it came out in the mid-90s when I was, I think it's sophomore. I actually printed off a list of gay novels on my school library computer, and I think I got into a bit of trouble for that. Next is another, and this is a classic of gay literature. It's Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran. I've had this book for ages as well. Probably about the same time I picked up Mysterious Skin. It's about the New York club scene in the 1970s, and I remember quite liking it, although it has been a while since I've read it. Probably north of 15 years. Really ought to revisit it. Next up are my Alan Hollinghurst novels. I've got all of them. First up is The Swimming Pool Library. This is the novel about a young gay man who, while he's out cruising, resuscitates an older gay man who's doing the same thing when the older gay man has a heart attack, and they sort of form a dialogue when the older gay man asks the younger to write his biography, and that kind of dredges up a lot of family history, gay history, stuff. And I'll talk a bit more about this Friday when I do weekly reads, because I did read the novel this weekend and actually read it. I actually finished it, which I'm thrilled about, and I'll talk a lot more about this on Friday. And I picked this up from a used bookstore in San Francisco when I was going to a bar to meet some other English grad students, as I want to do. If I see used bookstore, I will sometimes go into it. Next is The Folding Star by Alan Hollinghurst. Again, I picked this up in San Francisco, I think at a different light on the Castro. And this is about a English tutor living in Belgium who falls in love with a student, I think. I dipped into it when I first bought it, and I haven't come back to it since, so I really need to get to this in February. Last year I wanted to read all of Hollinghurst and ended up not making it all the way with the Swimming Pool Library. So now that I've actually read the Swimming Pool Library, I'm going to try to get the rest of Hollinghurst read this year. Next is the first Hollinghurst novel I've ever picked up, and that's The Spell. This is the story of 4 gay men, one who's middle-aged, his younger boyfriend, that boyfriend's ex-boyfriend, and the older gay man's son who becomes involved with the ex-boyfriend. It's been a while since I've read it. I really want to come back to it and reread it. So next is probably Hollinghurst's most famous novel, is the one he won the Booker Prize for, The Line of Beauty. This one is about a young gay man who I think it's involved in a relatively prominent political family in the 80s. A lot of Hollinghurst novels take place in the 80s, I would think. When I say I picked this up, I could just swear I picked this up from Book People in Austin, shortly before I graduated from St. Edward's. But it doesn't have the Book People sticker on the back. So I'm wondering if maybe I actually picked this up in San Francisco at a different night too. I'm not entirely sure, now that I think about it. The next book is one I picked up largely because I wanted to collect all of Hollinghurst's work, and that's The Stranger's Child. I want to say this is a relatively historical novel, but I don't know much about it. Need to have a go at it. And finally, Alan Hollinghurst's most recent novel, The Sparsholt Affair, which is a novel that starts in the 40s at Oxford and travels along the decades, as it follows a group of gay men at Oxford and their families and their lives since leaving Oxford, primarily focusing on the Sparsholt family. I dipped into it when it first came out and didn't particularly care for it at the time, which is typical with me and Hollinghurst. I do tend to bail on him and then come back and enjoy the books. But anyway. And moving on from Hollinghurst, I have Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Cedrowski. This came out last year and is about a young man who comes of age in communist Poland, who falls in love with a young man who eventually becomes a relatively prominent member of the Polish Communist Party. Next up are my Yasonati Kawabata novels. The first batch of them I picked up from, or were gifted to me by a professor who, one of his classes was an introduction to Japanese culture, which I took over the summer, and I did a paper on Yasonati Kawabata's Thousand Cranes, which will be at the end of this list. It's the first Kawabata I had, and so I did a paper on it, and towards my final semester he asked if I would like a box of Kawabata novels that he had, and I said sure. So I picked up a bunch of them. So the first up is probably my favorite novel by Kawabata, The Master of Go. This is about the final Go match between I always blank on his name. But it's a Go match that Kawabata covered in the late 30s or early 40s, I think, which is really good. I really enjoyed it. Probably come back, reread it sometime this year. Next is Sound of the Mountain. This is about a businessman who's relatively dissatisfied with his life and his children's lives. And he develops a sort of affection for his daughter-in-law. I mean, I didn't quite make a success of it the last time I tried to read it, but maybe when I have another go at it, it will be more successful. Next is Beauty and Sadness, which I've never gotten to. I need to. Then we have House of the Sleeping Beauties and Other Stories, which I haven't gotten to. And then The Old Capital, which I have read. It's about Kyoto and I think Woodcutter or something. It's been a while since I've read it. I need to reread it. And finally, Thousand Cranes, which is the first Kawabata novel I ever owned. It's the story of a young man whose father has passed, and he kind of becomes involved with his father's ex-lovers, and also one of said ex-lovers' daughter. It's weird. It's a very weird but engrossing and powerful novel. And then I have The Answers by Catherine Lacey. I picked this up for my America 20 project. I haven't gotten to it yet. I really would like to this year, so I can't say much about it. And then we have Crooked Little Heart by Anne Lamott, which is one of my failing vet wars. I've tried this novel 3 times, and I think I'm bailed on it each time. It's the story of basically the daughter in the family plays tennis, Rosie. She plays tennis. She's good. She's not great. And during the summer, when she kind of sort of comes of age, she sort of, so really hard to explain. She kind of falls out of love with tennis, and anyway. And then we have The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is a novel set in the United States about Indian immigrants whose son of the family has a quite unfortunate name. I mean, there's reasons why he has that name, but it's still rather unfortunate. And his sort of coming of age and growing up in America and coming to terms with his family and his Indian heritage. I tried it last year and ended up bailing on it, I think. Next is The Collector Stories of David Livett. I had this collection when it first came out from Book People, and ended up getting rid of it and recently added it back to my collection in I think 2020. I haven't read all of this. I don't know if I've ever read everything in here or not. I know I read, and I had before, Livett's short story collection, A Place I've Never Been, which I quite liked. So next is The Surrendered by Changreli. I want to say this novel looks at a Korean War vet and his life, I think. I picked it up for America 20 and I haven't gotten around to it yet. I really should. And next I have the London novels by Colin Mcinnis. This is a omnibus edition that includes City of Spades, Absolute Beginners, and Mr. Love and Justice. And I bought this on the strength of, or for Absolute Beginners, which is basically the coming of age of a nameless narrator who lives in London in the early mid 50s or late 50s. And I kind of wanted the novel largely because of the musical adaptation that came out in the 80s, starring David Bowie. Not as the main character, he plays more of the villain. But I really enjoyed the musical when I watched it. And I love the song Absolute Beginners. But I've never quite gotten on with the novel. And I probably will eventually, but it might take me a few more reading attempts to do so. And I haven't actually gotten around to the other novels in the collection. Next is The Great Believers by Rebecca Makai. This is a kind of a split novel. The first part is about a group of gay men in Chicago who slowly die of AIDS, primarily focusing on he works for a museum attached to a library, not a library, a university. I think like the University of Chicago or another university in Chicago. Then the other storyline, which takes place near contemporaneously, the first one takes place in the 80s, is about one of the one of the people involved who's going to look for her daughter and granddaughter in Paris. I bailed on the novel with about 100 pages, and probably should come back to it. I have this weird thing with fiction that hopefully is over, but we shall see. And finally, we have And Their Children After Them by Nicholas Mathieu. This is a French novel that I think looks at a last summer or something. Really need to get around to it. So that was part 9 of my 2022 library tour. Tomorrow I'll be wrapping up the modern and contemporary fiction, because there's only 3 shelves on this bookcase that I've got filled up. There's one that's empty, although I will clean it when I clean the 3rd shelves. One of the great things about doing a library tour is you can kind of clean those shelves as you go, which is what I've been doing. So yeah, and then I think on Wednesday I will probably do the manga, even though of course quite a good chunk of that's going to be spoiled later on today. So anyway, BookTube, I'm going to go ahead and get this loaded, uploaded, and out so I can go ahead and get on with the rest of my day, and I will be back later on this afternoon with my January book haul, which is going to be immense. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great morning, and stay safe.